I'm Oleg Novak, this is Chasing Cars, and today we are going to go on our first Australian drive in the all-new Subaru Solterra. Now, this car's been a long time coming for Subaru in Australia, and it's a fundamentally important vehicle for the brand as its first ever full electric vehicle. Now, interestingly for Subaru, they're leaning into a bit of their Subaru brand identity and pitching this as an EV that has a bit of off-road capability and go-anywhere capability. Now, today we want to answer a few questions, such as how good a job does the Solterra do at being a Subaru? Is it the EV we've all been waiting for? And should you consider buying one? So we're going to go on our first drive on and off-road to find out. But before we do that, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell below.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct.
Now, the Subaru Solterra is entering an increasingly competitive electric SUV market in Australia. In terms of its competitors, think the likes of the top-selling Tesla Model Y, but also other electric SUVs like the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6, Volkswagen ID4 and ID5, Ford Mustang Mach-E, and importantly, the Toyota BZ4X. Now, you might notice a few similarities because this is ultimately a twin to that car. They share the same platform. You can think of their relationship as similar to that of the Toyota GR86 and the Subaru BRZ as the best comparison. Now, interestingly, with the Toyota BZ4X, that model is going to be available with a front-wheel drive variant in Australia as an option, but the Solterra, like most Subarus in Australia, will be all-wheel drive only. Now, it's going to be available on two grades in Australia. You've got the base model grade, which costs $69,990 for the entry-level all-wheel drive before on-road costs, and you've also got this. This is the top-spec all-wheel drive touring, which comes in at $76,990 before on-road costs. Now, interestingly, Subaru has recently announced an $8,000 price drop on the Solterra from its originally announced pricing. That announcement came just days before Toyota announced pricing for the BZ4X. So that hints at a bit of a price war and an intensifying competition in the electric SUV market in Australia, with the BZ4X coming in slightly cheaper for its front-wheel drive variant and also slightly cheaper for its all-wheel drive top-spec variant as well. So let's check out the exterior. In terms of the exterior design of the Solterra, it's quite recognizable as a Subaru from the front because while it doesn't have a grille, the front fascia design definitely evokes that of the grille shape on petrol-powered Subarus. But unfortunately, no frunk on the Subaru Solterra, although we will check out the boot space a bit later. In terms of size of the Solterra, think of it as similar to the Toyota RAV4 or the Subaru Forester. It is a bit longer than both of those cars, and it also has a longer wheelbase thanks to its EV packaging. So we'll look forward to checking out the rear seats very shortly. Now, if we move along to the side of the car, you've got some other design elements over here, such as the black plastic cladding around here, around the wheel arches. Now, that definitely hints at some of the off-road capability that Subaru is definitely intending to position this vehicle as being able to do. Underneath those, you've got 20-inch wheels here on the top spec all-wheel drive touring, and importantly, you've got a 212mm ground clearance. Now, that's bigger than the 167 millimeters on the Tesla Model Y. It's also bigger than the Toyota RAV4's ground clearance, and it's a bit smaller than that you get on the Subaru Forester. So that's in terms of the ground clearance. We look forward to checking that out a bit later. In terms of the rest of the exterior design, you've got an EV badge over here to remind everyone that you are in fact driving an electric vehicle. So overall, in terms of the exterior design of the Subaru Solterra, what do you think? Do you think it looks like a Subaru? There are some definite hints, particularly at the front, but there's also some very overt Toyota BZ4X in there as well. Subjectively, I reckon it looks quite good, but let us know what you think in the comments section down below. Now, in terms of what's under the bonnet, you've got a 71.4 kilowatt hour gross capacity battery in there, and that powers two electric motors, one electric motor on the front axle, one on the rear axle, and they deliver a total combined power outputs of 160 kilowatts and 337 Newton meters of torque. So let's check out the interior of the Subaru Solterra. So inside the Subaru Solterra is probably perhaps where Subaru loyalists are going to find the biggest differences, because it's a very different cabin design to what you'll find in the rest of the petrol-powered lineup. But that's no bad thing, and overall I'm quite a big fan of it, as you'll find. But let's talk about some of the key differences from other Subarus first. And I guess one of the first ones to note is what it's like for the driver, because you've got this Peugeot-like design. And what I mean by that is that you've got the 7-inch digital instrument cluster here ahead of me, which is positioned higher up above the steering wheel. Then you've got a steering wheel which sits slightly lower, and you actually look above the steering wheel to see the digital instruments. You don't look through the top of the steering wheel. Now that's definitely something for you to try out to see if it works in terms of what you like in terms of your driving position. For me, it was fine. I got used to it very quickly and I actually quite liked it. The 7-inch digital instruments essentially work as a bit of a heads-up display in that sense. Now, as well as that, you've also got a steering wheel which is more square in shape, and I've been told that's essentially to help with vision of the digital instrument cluster above the steering wheel as well. So that's the first key difference in terms of the design of the cockpit for the driver. As well as that, you will find that instead of what you find in other Subarus, where you've got the vertical touchscreen, here you've got a 12.3-inch horizontal touchscreen. And overall, I found it to be quite responsive during my time with the car. The graphics are really good. You've got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto across the 2-grade range as well. One other thing that I do appreciate about this whole layout here is that you've got a lot of buttons and functionality for the climate controls, which are permanently there. You don't need to go through lots of sub-menus. You've also got a volume plus and minus button over there, and that's definitely something that's quite good so that you have quite a usable functionality in that regard. In terms of below the screen, you've got a few different functionalities here. You've got an interesting gear selector over here. Now it's a dial nod, but you have to push down and across to select gears as well. And behind that, you've got a little storage cubby here where you can charge your phone. It's got an interesting pattern over here where you can actually see through it. So you might be able to see if you get a notification or something on your phone. Now, in terms of other elements of the design, like the storage, the build quality, and the materials, I found the build quality to be quite solid during my time with the car. The materials are quite nice. I really like how you've got this cloth-like trim over here on the dashboard. I think it definitely adds to the coziness of the cabin, which I really like a lot. In terms of storage, there's quite a lot of space here on the center console down below this section over here. As I mentioned, you've got the storage cubby for your phone. You've got 2 cup holders over here, a center cubby here as well. You don't get a glove box, which is interesting. I thought only Mazda MX-5s could get away with that, but at least you've got some good storage over here. Now, one other thing that I didn't mention when I was talking about the driving position is the seats, and I found them to be really comfortable. They're really soft for a long trip. I really like them. So that's a good thing. In both grades, you get 8-way power adjustment to the seats. If you step up to the top spec all-wheel drive touring, which we are in right now, then you also score some synthetic leather accents on the seats. You get memory settings for the power seats at the front, and you also get 8-way power adjustment for the passenger seats. In terms of other features that you get on the all-wheel drive touring that you don't get on the base model, so you've got elements like a panoramic sunroof over here, which is letting some nice light in, which is good. You also get a 10-speaker Harman Kardon sound system as well. The base model has a 6-speaker system. So those are some considerations if you do want to spend the extra money to step up to the higher spec all-wheel drive touring. But overall, I'm a fan of the cabin. I drove an Outback as part of this launch drive as well, and overall I actually found the Solterra to be subjectively more appealing to me. But let's check out the rear of the Solterra. So in terms of the rear of the Subaru Solterra, it's also quite a pleasant place to be. So owing to that longer wheelbase, you've actually got really good legroom over here. Now it's 6 foot, 183 centimeters. I've got really decent legroom. This seat is actually moved back from my driving position. So I've got a bit less than if I was sitting in front of me, and that's perfectly adequate. So legroom is good. Headroom's okay as well. Tow room is good. Perhaps not enough under thigh support is maybe one slight criticism just for me at my height, but overall the seats are really comfy, which is good as well. Now, in terms of amenities for rear seat passengers, you've got 2 USB-C connection points over here for rear seat passengers, and you also get 2 outboard rear heated seats, which is also fantastic too. You've got rear air vents as well, and you've also got rear seat pockets as well over there. Now, you've got a fold down center armrest over here with 2 cup holders and a nice little place that you can put your phone or iPad as well. So overall, interior rear space is pretty good in the Solterra, but let's check out the all-important boot space in the rear. So let's check out the rear end of the Subaru Solterra and the all-important boot space, because practicality is a key selling point of a go anywhere, do anything SUV as this vehicle is positioned. But before we open the boot, one thing to note is the very sloping design of the rear end. So that's a cool design feature, but it is going to be a consideration in terms of practicality compared to a Forester, which has a much more upright rear end here. This is definitely going to impact your ability to load those big, bulky furniture items. But overall, it's still got, if you open the electric power tailgate, You've got 410 litres of boot space in here. So it's not massive, it's not class leading, but it is acceptable for the class. You've got some other amenities over here, like a rear cargo cover as well. Now, one thing that is a bit disappointing is that you don't get a spare wheel in the Solterra. So that's disappointing just in the sense that if you are going off-road and off the beaten track, it would be good to have that peace of mind. So that's one thing to note. In terms of other amenities, you've got some cargo hooks over here. You've got a little cover for the floor over here, and you can also pull this up to reveal a section under here to store your cables and such as well. One extra element to mention is that you can get further boot space by putting down the rear seats, and they fold down 60/40 at the rear as well. So a fun fact as we start our drive in the Subaru Solterra, and that's that its name is actually derived from two Latin words for sun and earth. So lots of sun today, lots of earth. I'm going to be checking out some of the off-road capability of the vehicle to see if it lives up to how Subaru is positioning it as an EV. But one of the first things I will talk about as part of our drive is just one of the first things I noticed, and that's its comfort. So I spent the majority of my time in the driving in terms of the base spec all-wheel drive model, so not the all-wheel drive touring model that I'm in now. And on the 18-inch wheels, I found it to be a very comfortable drive. It was extremely compliant. It soaked up bumps on some pretty bad roads really well, and coupled with the nice seats, I thought it was a really comfortable place to be together with the nice cabin. So that's one element with drive experience. Definitely a comfortable car, and probably tuned more towards comfort than performance, which we will discuss in that regard. Now, I haven't spent as much time driving the all-wheel drive touring. This is actually my first time driving that one today, right now. But overall, I'd like to spend a bit more time in this one to see if the 20-inch wheels make any noticeable difference to the ride quality of the vehicle. But overall, on the 18s, I thought it was really good. Now, we've talked about the ride, but what about steering? Well, in terms of the steering, nothing much to say in that regard other than the fact that it's very light, it's very predictable, it's very easy. So I think, especially if this is your first time driving an EV, together with the powertrain works, I think you'll find it a very easy car to get accustomed to. And especially if you're a Subaru driver who's looking to step up from a petrol-powered Subaru, I think it'll be very easy to get accustomed to. So steering, very nice and predictable, but again, it's not tuned towards performance. So that is one thing to note in the Subaru Solterra. With a lot of its competitors like the Mach-E and the Tesla Model Y, you've got those hyper-performance variants which achieve very fast 0 to 100 km/h acceleration times. And with the Solterra, you don't get that breakneck acceleration that you get in those other EVs. You've just got the one powertrain across the range, and overall, it's not a performance car. But at the same time, while it might be slow in that sense compared to those hyper-fast EVs, it's got plenty of power, I found. Enough for your daily life. I don't think you'll be lacking for any power, and I thought it was perfectly fine on my initial drive with it today. You do have driving modes that you can choose from. So over here, you've got a drive mode button, and I'm glad that they've actually got a button for it rather than having to cycle through any menus. So you can select between a normal mode, a power mode, and also a eco mode. Now, the power mode will essentially liven up the acceleration and allow you to get more power out of the vehicle. So we've talked about the ride comfort, the steering, the ride and handling and the performance. Another thing to note is in terms of the efficiency. So one key thing to mention here is you've got a button over here for the S pedal drive. So that essentially enables you to go into maximum regen mode and drive with one pedal. So you can do that, or you can use the paddles on the steering wheel to essentially manually determine what level of regenerative braking you would like to apply. So you've got about 3 settings with those of different levels, or you can go to the maximum setting, the S pedal drive, and utilize the one pedal driving, which I was actually doing for the majority of my drive. And I found it to be, a lot of the times with these systems, it can take a bit of time to get accustomed so that you're not driving too jerkily, but I thought it was very natural and intuitive, and I could achieve a relatively smooth kind of drive experience with the one pedal drive mode of the Solterra. So that's another good thing in that regard. Just to note, in terms of the performance aspects of this Subaru Solterra, there had been some previous rumors about a high performance version, perhaps an STI or STE badged version. So fingers crossed that a more performance focused version might make its way into the lineup eventually for the Solterra. Now, in terms of the performance of the Solterra, now that is one thing to note, that you don't have a high performance version of this vehicle. So compared to other competitor EVs, you've got those high performance versions in the lineup which have that very fast acceleration speed. And if that is something you're after in terms of an electric vehicle of that very fast acceleration, you're not going to get that in the Solterra. It doesn't have that breakneck performance of some of those sub 5 second accelerating cars, but for me I found it was still perfectly good, perfectly adequate, and for a daily drive around town I thought it was very good. In terms of the handling, it does seem to actually handle pretty well. You don't feel the weight too much. I didn't find on this initial drive it does weigh over 2 tons, but I thought in terms of the ride and handling, given it's very comfortable, it didn't seem like you were carrying around 2,000 kilos with you all of the time. But in terms of that performance observation, it would be great if Subaru did offer a more performance-oriented version in the lineup. There had been rumors of an STI or STE branded version, so fingers crossed that might eventuate eventually. Now, a key element to chat about, given how this vehicle is marketed, is in terms of its off-road ability. Now, to do that, we took it on a bit of an off-road track. So I did a descent of pretty steep terrain, some water crossings and some off-road components, and overall the Solterra coped really well. Before we just chat about that a bit further, let's note some key features in regard to that off-road ability. So the Solterra comes with an X mode. So you can essentially use the functionalities over here to put it in X mode, and you've got a snow, dirt and gravel mode. Now, essentially that works with the all-wheel drive system to maximize traction of the vehicle, and it essentially applies brakes to spinning wheels to create a bit of an LSD effect. As well as that, you've also got a grip control functionality. So with that, you can essentially, it kind of works a bit like cruise control, where you can set a speed of the vehicle up to 10 kilometers an hour in 2 kilometer an hour increments. So you can use this plus and minus selector button over here to select it at 2 kilometers an hour, for example, or plus for 4 kilometers an hour and more so. And that essentially just helps you to apply a constant level of power input to essentially help maintain traction if you're going off-road as well. So overall, I thought that the Solterra did a really good job. We managed to pass through the water crossings, very bumpy terrain, off-road through all the mud, sand and dirt and the steep descent quite well without too many issues, and it performed very well. I did it in a cross track going up as well, and both vehicles were very competent at it. So I think in terms of the fact that you've got an electric vehicle here that does offer some of that off-road capability, that's a really good thing. Ultimately, I'd like to go on a bit of a longer route though to test that out more in depth and maybe push it a bit more to its limits to see just how far off-road this vehicle can go. But at least on initial impression, the Solterra seems to do a really good job, and it's good to have those features there that you can utilize to just maximize that traction and functionality off-road. So I guess the last thing to note in terms of that off-road capability is that observations of what would make that package more complete, if that is where the Subaru would like to position this vehicle as a do-anything SUV, and that is if it had a spare wheel and also longer range to just kind of give you that peace of mind if you are going off the beaten track and off-road for much longer distances. So that would be fantastic if that was the case, but pretty good so far. So what about safety features? Well, the Subaru Solterra has just scored a maximum 5-star NCAP crash safety rating, and it also comes equipped with a whole suite of safety features, including the likes of autonomous emergency braking, dynamic radar cruise control, lane departure alert, lane tracing assist, road sign assist, and a driver monitoring system. I didn't find the lane assistance aids to be too intrusive during my time with the car initially, and only had one alert that I wasn't paying attention to the road, so it did seem better than some of the more intrusive systems out there. As well as that, you also get other features like a blind spot monitor, front parking sensors, a 360-degree camera, rear cross traffic alert, and adaptive high beams. The Subaru Solterra comes with a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty. As well as this, the battery is covered by an 8-year, 160,000 kilometre warranty too. Service intervals are every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, whichever comes first. Significantly, Subaru is including a 5-year, 75,000 kilometre service plan with any Solterra purchase free of charge, as well as 5 years of roadside assistance. So what about in terms of charging and efficiency? Well, we haven't yet conducted an in-depth test, but we can share some initial results from our launch drive, where we drove the Solterra for 110 kilometres across a mix of highway, urban, country, and some gravel roads. This included a mixture of different drive modes and efficiency settings as we became acquainted with the car. Based on the vehicle's 64 kilowatt-hour usable battery capacity, we consumed 18.6 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometres on our launch drive, with that figure extrapolating to a total projected range of 343 kilometres. It's important to note that these are initial results only, so we'll wait to see how the Solterra performs when we get it into the garage for more in-depth testing. In terms of charging, the Solterra has both AC and DC charging capability, and Subaru says the Solterra can get from 0 to 80% charge via a 150 kilowatt DC charger in approximately 30 minutes. Using a single-phase 7 kilowatt AC charger will reportedly go from 0 to 100% charge in approximately 9.5 hours, and an 11 kilowatt 3-phase plug taking approximately 6.5 hours to get from 0 to 100% charge. So how does this Subaru Solterra do at being a Subaru? Is it the EV we've all been waiting for? And ultimately, should you consider buying one? Well, it is quite different to a lot of Subarus in the lineup. It is electric after all, and there's a lot of differences in the interior from what a lot of Subaru buyers will be used to. But what I do appreciate is that Subaru has tried to inject some of that off-road ruggedness to the vehicle. It's got a bit of off-road capability, and I think that's very exciting to see in an EV segment, which doesn't have much of that. So that should definitely be applauded. I think in that regard, it would be great to lean into that off-road go anywhere capability even further. So it'd be great to have things like a spare wheel. That would definitely add the peace of mind. So it's a bit of shame that it doesn't have that. As well as that, a longer range variant would also be fantastic, just in terms of leaning into that go anywhere capability of this vehicle to go off the beaten track. So perhaps in future, that might be something Subaru could look into. But in terms of the Solterra as a general EV, it's a very pleasant drive. It's very comfortable, and overall, I really liked it on my initial drive here today. What it doesn't offer in terms of the range is a more high performance variant. So unlike the Mach-E or the Tesla Model Y, you don't have those very fast variants with the Solterra, which just has the same powertrain across its 2-grade lineup. So if that's something you're looking for in terms of a performance focused EV, but ultimately for what the Subaru Solterra is trying to do, I think it's a good first effort for Subaru as their first EV. And I think Subaru owners who are looking to go EV will definitely like what they see in this Subaru Solterra. Ultimately, we would like to get the car into the garage for longer to test out its off-road capabilities even more. Not only that, to do a proper range, efficiency and charging test, because that will definitely enable us to form a final, more conclusive opinion. So we look forward to sharing that soon. Now, those are just my initial impressions of the Subaru Solterra, but we'd love to know what you have to think. So let us know down below in the comments section, would you buy a Subaru Solterra? While you're there, make sure you hit like, subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.